Hello my dear friends and welcome to my channel. Don't forget to make yourself a cup of hot drink with snacks if you want, because today we have very interesting stories, and one of them is a story about a woman who wanted to make a cruel joke and then it turned out bad for her. Please subscribe if you haven't and I hope you'll enjoy it. Cast: GC. Good cousin. GH. Good husband, GC's husband. BC. Entitled cousin, GC's twin sister, you can call her evil cousin too, both work. So this story doesn't involve me too much, but I know quite a lot about EC's actions and behavior through stories family members and GC told me. Ever since we were little kids, my cousin, GC, and I have been best buds. We lived only a few miles away from one another, so we would bike to each other's houses, play in our backyards, and play video games. GC comes from an extremely wealthy family. Her dad, my uncle, started a business when he was 20, and it has been super successful to the point there are now several large locations across the globe. Even though this family is crazy rich, they live a very modest lifestyle. They live in a small 2-story home on a few acres of land, and a large pond takes up most of it. The one lavish thing they do is that every 2 or 3 years, they go on a cruise. GC is one of 3 children. She has an older brother and her identical twin sister, EC. You may think the good twin, evil twin scenario is only seen on the TV screen, but GC and EC are the real-world equivalent. GC is kind and generous, while EC selfish and entitled. EC always had this idea in her head that, because her dad was so wealthy, she didn't have to lift a finger in life to get what she wanted. Good things just came to her, GC, and their brother, but GC had the common sense to know that she can't always rely on daddy's money. Despite getting pretty much everything they wanted growing up, GC and her brother never had entitled attitudes. Their parents are also super nice, so EC was always the evil standout of the family. EC's attitude only got worse as time went on. Eventually, EC got married and had a kid, a boy. EC's husband is just as nasty as she is, so they were kind of made for each other. EC always wanted to rub her child in GC's face, like she wanted gloat about having a kid before she did. GC had a history of bad relationships, including those that involved verbal and physical abuse. One time, she came to her sister for advice after her boyfriend beat her. EC had the nerve to blame her weight and not using makeup to make herself more attractive. EC was afraid to date anyone after her last relationship disaster, but that changed when she finally met the man of her dreams. I met GH personally, and he's a giant teddy bear of a guy. He's the perfect guy to help heal GC's old wounds and give her the loving, happy life she deserves. Then, nearly 2 years after they met, GC and GH were engaged. The entire family was thrilled that GC finally got the man of her dreams, and her father wanted to throw a boatload of money to her to help pay for a beautiful wedding. For future reference, he did the same thing for EC when she got married, yet EC was not happy about how extravagant GC's wedding was going to be. EC wanted to be married at Niagara Falls and invite basically everyone she knew, and her father was going to pay for pretty much all of it. EC was furious. She talked to GC and their father about the wedding and how all the money being spent better not interfere with the family's upcoming cruise. Yes, they still went on cruises together every few years, despite the children being grown and having families of their own. Their father said that because of the wedding and how expensive it was going to be, the family cruise would have to be pushed back another year or 2. EC practically exploded. She blamed GC for taking the cruise away from her and her precious boy, who was 5 at this point. She said she told her son how they were going on a cruise and how now he's going to be so upset now because his selfish aunt wanted to get married instead of giving him a happy week in the tropics. EC even had the audacity to demand GC to reschedule the wedding for next year so they could go on the cruise instead. EC, who is normally not a confrontational person, had it with her sister's attitude and told her if she wanted to go on a cruise, she would have to pay for it herself. EC and her husband were nowhere near as wealthy as their father, and there was no way he was going to reschedule his own daughter's wedding just to give EC what she wanted. EC's ranting went on for weeks, flipping back and forth between blaming her sister for ruining her son's year and begging her father for money to go on a cruise because she and her family deserved it. She drove GC to tears and she ended up calling me up for advice. My only advice to her was to give EC, who normally gets everything, nothing, and by nothing, I mean don't invite her to the wedding. Like most sisters would do, GC wanted EC to be one of her bridesmaids, as she was a bridesmaid at EC's wedding. Not inviting her would be a major upset for everyone involved, but it just may be the thing to teach EC a lesson. So she did just that. GC called up her sister and flat out told her that if she didn't change her attitude, she didn't want it leaving a sour taste at her wedding. Again, EC blew up shouting at GC, calling her all sorts of names, and again blaming her for the cruise being cancelled. GC hung up and decided to not invite her to the wedding. The wedding was amazing, and I ended up being the bridesmaid to take EC's place. Yes, I was invited to the wedding originally, but GC didn't want me to be a bridesmaid, only because she knew I hated dresses, and I'd rather wear a suit, but I said I'd wear a dress just for her special day. It's been a few years now and GC and GH have a beautiful little girl and have a baby boy on the way. EC is still in their lives, and is still nasty as ever, but she doesn't come to her father begging for anything anymore, because after her behavior towards him and GC, he threatened to leave her out of his will if she continued to pester either of them. Maybe now that she's not going to get everything handed to her on a silver platter, she'll change her attitude for the better, or at least that's what we all wish to happen. Good for GC. That was a big step in the right direction for everyone involved. She probably would have been awful and disruptive at the wedding anyway. Way to not tolerate bad behavior. I'm a former police officer who had to retire due to being badly injured, but this was one of my last calls before the incident that forced me into retirement. I worked for a small-town police department with only 5 or 6 officers on duty at a given time, and we each covered a vast swath of land. My beat mainly was the rural area and county highway that passes throughout the little town. One clear sunny afternoon I'm doing speed enforcement on the highway when my radio crackles to life of a possible kidnapping in progress, and the dispatcher proceeds to provide the details of the make and model of the car, including a female driver with short blonde hair. I proceed to get onto my computer to see if there are any more details given about this, and sure enough, there is in the call log. It provides even more details saying RP, reporting party, reports there is a young kid sitting in the hatchback part of the vehicle with a sign that says help, I've been kidnapped. Call 911, and their hands appear to be tied together. Well, the call is within our jurisdiction, they're nowhere near me, so there is nothing I can do at the moment besides other officers and sheriff deputies who are already looking for the vehicle. All is quiet for the next 10 minutes. Everybody is behaving themselves and driving the speed limit when my radio crackles to life again. We're getting another call regarding the reported kidnapping. They're now traveling on County Highway 123, and my ears perk up and my heart starts to race as the vehicle is coming to my direction and will be here any minute. As I'm waiting for the call, dispatch get 3 more calls from fellow drivers who have seen this young kid holding up the help, I've been kidnapped sign and had called 911 to report it. But this stretch of highway being very flat, I'm able to see cars miles and miles away, especially if I'm using binos, and sure enough here comes the van, and as the van passes me, I can see the female driver who matches the description given by the RPs and the kid sitting up against a sidewall in the hatchback area. I don't pull out right away just in case this is an honest-to-God kidnapping. I don't want to spook the driver and get into a high-speed chase, not to mention I'm completely alone, and in this type of situation, you want to have a decent amount of backup in case they decide to run, shoot it out or whatever. So I wait until she's a good mile or 2 away, then I pull out and tail her from that distance until I can get some backup. Luckily there is a highway patrol barracks not too far away, and they heard my call for assistance. Just as we pass the road that leads to the highway patrol barracks, I see 4 trooper vehicles pull out behind me, so I fall back and let the troopers take the lead in case this turned into a chase. They'd already be in position. While we're getting into position to stop the van, we're talking about how we're going to approach the situation. Are we going to do a soft traffic stop and proceed as a regular traffic stop and just pull the driver out of the vehicle, or are we going to do a full felony stop? We decided to do a full felony stop, so we spread out across all 4 lanes of traffic and all turn out lights and blip our sirens at the same time. The female doesn't pull over to the side of the highway in the breakdown lane, but instead slammed on the brakes and stops in the middle of the highway. We all position our vehicles to give us the maximum amount of coverage in case of a gunfight, then get out with weapons drawn while ordering the female driver out of the vehicle. We should have known something was up when as soon as she got out of the vehicle she started screaming it was a freaking joke, but right now we're not too interested in what she has to say. The point man keeps telling her to keep walking backward until we tell her to stop and then get down on the ground. She complies, and she's cuffed. Next, we turn our attention to the female passenger whom we didn't know at the time, as we couldn't see her face was the female driver's 13-year-old daughter, but none. We ordered her backward, get on the ground, and cuffed her. We did this for the next 4 passengers who were riding in the 4 seats in the back of the van. Once we got all perceived threats out of the vehicle and secured, 2 troopers went up to clear the vehicle, while another trooper and myself rescued the young boy who was bawling from the hatchback and put him in the back of one of our vehicles to get him away from his perceived kidnappers. The whole time, mind you, the driver and front female passengers kept yelling, "It's a joke. He's my son, brother. I can't believe you guys." So after securing everybody in separate vehicles, we start to get to the bottom of the situation. The first person we talk to is the young boy who has since calmed down after the female trooper got him a stuffed dinosaur and a snack and began to start asking him questions. This is when we learned the whole thing was the female driver's and her daughter's sick idea of a funny prank, since the van was full and they decided to put the young kid in the hatchback. They thought it would be funny to make a sign saying "Help, I've been kidnapped," and have the young boy hold it up while someone else in the van recorded the reaction of other drivers after they read the sign. Apparently, they've been doing it all day and just didn't get caught until they reached our area, after talking to the other passengers who were all under the age of 16 and learned it was mainly the idea of the mother and teen daughter, and after some discussion with the county DA on how it should be handled, we were told to kick the 4 teenagers in the back loose with no charges. To write the teenage daughter the juvenile equivalents of a ticket for inducing panic, and last but not least saved the best for mom. I opened the back door of my vehicle so I could talk to the mom. As soon as I did, she started to get out of the vehicle. When I told her to stay put, she said, "Why? Don't you need to take the handcuffs off me so I can sign the ticket you're going to give me, right?" I said, "It's not quite that simple. I'm afraid you're in a bit more trouble than a simple ticket. You're going to be charged with several felonies." This is when she lost it and started screaming over and over again it was a freaking joke. I can't believe nobody can take a freaking joke anymore. It was a joke. Now uncuff me, or I am going to have my husband sue you for unlawful detention. I proceeded to read her Miranda warning, all the while she starts sobbing with no tears, I might add, while muttering it was a freaking joke. After I finished with her Miranda warning, I asked her if she was willing to talk to me. She told me to back off. I did just that and shut the door to let her wait for the transport vehicle. By this time the husband and father had shown up at the scene to collect his kids and the vehicle and was filled in on the situation. All he could do is shake his head and say this isn't the first time she does stupid crap like this before. It's just the first time she's been caught. And I've warned her in the past not to do it because I knew it would end up in a situation like this. After about 10 minutes the transport van showed up and took her away, and I went back to a quiet afternoon of catching speeders. The female driver was charged with the following: 7 counts of inducing panic, all misdemeanor. 6 counts of felony child endangerment, 1 for each kid she had in the vehicle. The reason it was a felony is that her actions put her children's lives in danger by forcing us to do a felony stop over a prank or joke. 1 count of having an unrestrained child. She decided to put her 6-year-old son in the hatchback of the van because they didn't have any room up front. Well, none of those kids should have been back there. I'd rather one of the older kids instead of the 6-year-old. The reason why? Because the other boys were too tall and wouldn't have been comfortable back there. Imagine how many potential car accidents she could have caused by encouraging her son to startle people with that kidnapped sign. Not to mention what could have happened if she had crashed during the emergency stop when the police pulled her over. I, 29F, don't have any kids, but have my younger sister, 16, living with me for around 10 years, and we have a trampoline still in our back garden from when she was younger. Neighbor to the left of me has 4 kids and moved in a year ago. 2 weeks ago, Glasgow started getting really good weather, so the kids have been out playing constantly, not an issue. They asked if I could let the kids use the trampoline one day, so I was like sure, but only for a bit, because I have friends coming over for some drinks. 7 p.m. comes, I ask them to go home, because my 5 friends have shown up, and we're going to be drinking. Cue the crying, they leave the garden upset, but hey, that's not my issue, they've been on it for 3 hours at this point. Their mum pops her head out her bedroom window and asks if they can stay in the garden longer. No. I'm not your babysitter. She's annoyed, but drops it. Last week, I come home from some shopping and to my surprise, find all 4 of the kids in the garden, plus their younger cousin. Ask them to leave, tell them they can't just come into my garden without me there, and they didn't even ask. They refuse to leave, so I shout up at their mum and tell her to get them out of the garden. She says let them play for a bit, you don't even use it. Okay, but still, not your garden. Eventually we get into an argument and they leave, she's pissed off and shouting saying I'm being a Karen and I should let them in. I tell her not to ask again because the answer will be no. This happened again the day after, all 4 kids plus their cousin, waiting till I move the car from the drive and heading straight into the garden. So I wake up this morning. I've since put a lock on the trampoline, just a small one on the mesh safety enclosure to stop them opening it up, cause I'm petty AF. Plus it's Saturday, I'm not working today, my day off, and I want a long lie. But no, neighbor decides that at 9 a.m. this morning, her kids are being fired straight out that house with breakfast bars and a bottle of water, and they head straight into the garden. So I can hear them from my window, I look out and tell them to leave. By the time I get downstairs, mum has descended from her house and is trying to climb the fence between our gardens, shouting about how I used to let them use it and she's going to call the police for hitting her kids. Great, you do that. I'll be sure to show them the Ring camera footage, which coincidentally also has footage of your husband picking the lock open so your brats can use the trampoline. So, long story short, entitled mother send her kids into my garden repeatedly, even after being told not to. Calls police on me for harassment and hitting her kids, and ends up getting her own husband arrested for theft and housebreaking and criminal damage. Screw it, witch. Crazy entitled witch. Great ending to the story. But you're not petty at all. Your house, your garden and trampoline. I think I would have either taken the trampoline away or spread something really nasty all over it. Well guys, that's it for today. If you end up enjoying this video please consider subscribing, and if you missed the last episode on the channel I'm gonna link it right here. The story is about a woman who wanted to return a game to GameStop, but something went wrong. Check this out if you haven't, and I'll see you in my next video.